Joining me now, Brian Brenberg, co-host of The Big Money Show, and John Carney, co-author of Breitbart Business Digest and Breitbart Finance and Economics editor. Gentlemen, Carney, I want to start with Christopher Waller. You alerted me to it.
Yes.
So I went and read the whole damn thing. It's about 10 pages, not so bad. And it was a beautiful statement. Because I hope, look, I feel like mailing it to Mary Daly of the San Francisco Fed, okay? That's for starters, because she let all these West Coast banks diddle around with climate loans that never should have been made. And maybe also CC Janet Yellen on the copy. What do you think?
It was really, you should definitely do that, but it was really refreshing to finally read somebody, a Fed governor saying something sensible on this climate change stuff. All we've had for a long time is they were even thinking of imposing special climate change stress tests.
Yeah.
And they need to move away from that. Powell has signaled he doesn't want to be a climate regulator. This Waller speech, I think, is a game changer. It is moving people away from this idea that the Fed should be focused on transition risk and climate risk. That was all nonsense to begin with, and now we're finally hear it from Waller. This is great.
The first time this surfaced, smart people, these climate things take 50 or 100 years, and they're worried about next week's stress test. Brian Brenberg, I'm just going to say this. I want to get back to the rest of my riff, but this is Waller. My role is not to be a climate policymaker. Right there, I'd give him a Nobel Prize in economics. Right there.
It took him only 3 bank collapses to figure that out. That's pretty good, right? I mean, your bar for beautiful is so low on a Fed speech. 20 years ago, is there any person in the Fed who would have said our job is to do climate change 30 years ago? I mean, this is where we are.
Did you say 30 days ago?
No, I said 30 years ago.
But this was an attempt all along to backdoor climate regulation that they can't pass democratically. Yes. They were trying to do it through the banks.
Yeah.
They tell the banks, we don't want you lending to fossil fuel companies, and so therefore we'll have less fossil fuel. That was the actual strategy. So it was, I agree with you, beautiful to hear Waller push back on that.
Beautiful.
I like how you said it. But they've gone beyond that now, because so you've got the Fed, whatever they're going to do. Now you've got this EPA rule, and that's a real killer. You're making the right case for growth. You can't solve inflation without growth. Even if everyone at the Fed listened to Waller, you've still got the bureaucracy running this EPA rule, and it is actually an economy killer.
These are crazy people.
I mean, this is not just a little bit of socialism.
The EPA is a whole building of crazy people to think. Some estimates are half of our power would be knocked out, because even if you could do some of the hydrogen stuff along with the natural gas, they don't have the technology for that, and they don't have the carbon capture technology, and you couldn't get a pipeline through anyway.
This is living on a dream and a prayer. You're right. The fundamental technology they're relying on, carbon capture, we don't even know if we can do that.
That's right.
But within 10 years, you have to have it all done. I mean, so actually it starts now. The problem is everybody who's affected by this has to start planning for it now. The effect doesn't come in a decade. It comes within the year, actually.
Meanwhile, while China and India keep opening up new coal plants.
Right.
So how are we going to save the planet from climate if they're bigger than we are? They're knocking out high-carbon coal plants.
We can't make a difference on our own, first of all, so that won't do anything. It reminds me of a joke my kids told me, which was, why was the car running on fumes? Because it kept passing gas. So
This is a family show.
The point of the joke is that if you're not filling up with fuel, the economy itself will be running on fumes, and that's what we're doing to ourselves with these EPA rules.
Brian, it's time for some supply-side growth. It's time. Scuttlebutt is McCarthy's plan, which has some very good elements in it, might get through. Now, it'll be trimmed here and there, but they're looking at permitting reform, which would be great. They're going to buy the COVID clawback, which would be great. The speed limit, but we don't know what the speed limit will be. It may or may not be 1% growth, and the work requirements. So you've got a couple of pro-growth things in there for a change.
I love it, but your optimism that all that's going to stay in there is astounding to me. Do you really think all of those pieces make it through this negotiation? I would love to see it, and it's what we need, but...
Some days my optimism is
you
astounding
made such a great case on this, but I don't see Biden going... H.R. 1, I don't see any of that happening.
Yeah, I'm very worried about the permitting because I know that they are so ideologically opposed to extracting fuel out of the American ground. They'd rather go to Venezuela to get it than to get it out of America.
If you keep repeating stuff, it comes true sometimes. You know, politics.
All right, we're
politics
get
is like
wrong.
religion. If you say it enough, you actually come to believe it. I've always felt that way. I know it's a reach. I get that. I just thought I'd put it in on a Friday, but I'm hearing pretty good. Scuttlebutt.
I do think you're right on the work requirements, by the way. I do think that has a real chance. And that could actually be almost as important as HR1.
Work requirements is very important. But the permitting stuff has to have Democratic support in the Senate.
Sure.
Some.
Well, Manchin.
It takes 60 votes to get stuff through.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something there. John Carney, I think the Fed should be on pause.
Yes, well, I came to agree with you,
I know.
but I'm not
excited.
sure they are going to pause. Michelle Baumann gave a speech in Frankfurt, Germany today in which she indicated that it may need to go higher. I think they still think they pause in June, but I think they may end up returning to hiking in July. I think the argument for not pausing in June is that the market is still pricing in cuts as early as July. And if the Fed wants to push them off of that position, the best way to do that would be one more hike because nobody's expecting that.
Brian, last thoughts. You know, the CBO came out and gave us a new X day for the debt. I mean, they basically said if you get through the June 15th, a corporate tax day. Yep. You get through that with cash, and they'll find cash. They can go right through July.
I think Yellen came out with that June 1 X day clearly as a negotiating tactic. They want to put pressure on to do something in an emergency. You made the case in this. You've made this many times, actually. The federal government can prioritize its payments. We don't have to default in the debt. We can close parts of the government. We don't have to default. This is a negotiating tactic by Democrats to force a bad deal instead of getting a good deal. I think McCarthy should call bluff on that June 1 date and say, we're going to get this done right. We don't think June 1's the date.
You know, I don't want to default on the debt. We never will default on the debt. But if I had a trade-off, I mean this honestly, if I thought, so I wait 10 or 12 days to pay the interest on the 10-year bond, if that's what it took to get a $5 trillion spending cut, I would do it. I would do it.
Well, the market...
I don't want to default. That wouldn't be... But you know what? If you went right to the edge on this, I mean, Trump implied this two nights ago, and he doesn't want default either. But the point is, if you don't cut spending ever, then you're going to be in the soup. Right. You just are. And if a 10-day interest payment, late interest payment, I just want the spending cuts. It's the because, you know, also one last point, the spending cuts. Spending programs contain regulatory red tape. Yeah. That's where all those regulations are thrown in.
Right.
Was I throw the whole thing out? Throw the whole damn thing out.
I think they're trying to make it very scary for Republicans to play chicken on that date. I think Republicans should. I'm not saying they need to delay 10 days.
But play chicken.
But I don't think that date is right. And I think you should call their bluff and say, you can make all your payments. This is a false crisis in terms of defaulting on our debt. It's more about closing the government. And if you got to do that to get $5 trillion in cuts, do that all day long.
Me too.
Yellen admitted that they can prioritize subtly from Japan. She said, well, we may have to default on something. And when she says default, she means not pay. And it's very easy. You don't have to default on a bond. You just tell a government contractor, hey, the check's in the mail. You're going to get it 2 weeks later.
Well, that's true. But I like that. Save America, close the government. It's another good one. Save America, play chicken. We got to get out of here. Brian Brenberg, terrific stuff. We appreciate it. John Carney, thank you.